welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have Frederick Shegog. Frederick is a keynote speaker, a CEO of The Message, and he holds a master's degree in public administration. It is my absolute honor to welcome Frederick Shegog.
Thank you. Your intro is so professional. Remind me of a newscaster. You should be a reporter. No, God is good. I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be here. Every time I hear my name, I hear, the credentials God has blessed me with. It's just still unfathomable. To think that that's where we're at. I'm just very blessed and grateful that I get to do this for a living. I'm grateful I get to help people. So.
Freddie, I am thrilled to have you on today because our listeners are in for one of the most inspirational stories. And I just also want to say thank you so much for those compliments. It's funny. I've been on a couple podcasts and I go from the really serious intro to Courtney. So you'll
Yeah, it's so different seeing you so serious because you're always so bubbly and stuff. Your professional side is I'm used to the other Courtney, yo, what up? Because that's me. We got the same energy.
It's that for me, it's a multifaceted personality.
Right.
If I need to be serious, I'll be
Right.
serious, but then you'll see the other side of
Right. Right.
Well, Freddie, I would love to begin with just your story. If you could begin with your story.
Yeah. So it's wild, right? I'm writing my first book. I'm on the chapter about my childhood, right? It's just, it's a beautiful mess, man. That's the best way to put it. Long story short, childhood was just rough. But it was great and rough, right? So I grew up with a mother that went to treatment once when I was in third grade, and by God's grace, she passed away last year with 30 years sobriety. She never relapsed. Single parent home, social worker. She had severe mental illness. Both my parents were drug addicts. My mom went and got sober. Dad wasn't in my life. I didn't meet him till way later. My granddad stepped in and raised me. And, just childhood's filled with trauma, but I presented well and I looked well, so you wouldn't know that, right? I learned early how to hide things. Just a regular American story, man. Black kid, poor, mom, social worker. Fast forward, about 9 years ago, I'm homeless downtown, dumpster diving, begging for change. I wanted to die, I tried to, but God said no. And I remember begging, panhandling, and asking somebody for money, and the woman spit on me and called me a racial epithet. That's why I made the decision that it was time for me to die. I tried to, a man woke me up and said, brother, you ain't dying today. And I had asked him, let me die here. And he was like, no, I called the ambulance. He gave me a pill and a bottle of water. Now, mind you, Philadelphia has a homeless epidemic, right? Just like the rest of America, right? Encampments are normal, right? All that. And the fact that he stopped for me is God. That told me I was meant to be here. So I went to treatment. Never forget it. I get there. And mind you, I can't countless treatments, countless, all that. Call my mom. I say, yo, I'm going to get sober. I'll never forget. She said, Freddie, I hope I didn't get sober to bury you, because I will. My mother understood that with mental illness, substance use disorder, you can't enable. And because that was her field, her way of life, she just understood how she treated me like a client, not a parent. She's able to separate it. Most people can't do that. Yeah. So something clicked in there. I don't know what to tell you. Something just clicked. I did a year of treatment. I got out. I went back to school. When I went back to school, I met a professor that told me to write about my story. I wrote my story, a paper called Identity. It got published in the Philadelphia Inquirer. School called me. Rest history.
Wow. Yeah. There's so much to unpack from that. So let's go back. So when you were there and you describe yourself as homeless, how did you muster up that confidence? I know you mentioned that individual that came, but how did you muster up that confidence, that sense of, I could do this, I could pull myself together to then even go get an education? So could you just walk us
Yeah.
through that journey? What was going through your mind at that
So
point?
this will help because I don't get into this part.
Yeah.
So when I went to treatment, right, I remember being in the basement, and I had gotten this time I got to treatment because it gets worse every time you go to treatment, right? With drug and alcohol use, it gets worse every time you come in. And I ain't have no clothes. I ain't have nothing. And so I'm in the basement. Brother Harold, I'll never forget this. I'm going through the basement and I'm digging through the clothes, right? And he said to me, "You gonna pick out underwear?" I said, "Excuse me?" And then it hit me. I'm picking out underwear. I'm going through the ones that aren't stained. And then it hit me, and these are donated underwear, that like, wait a minute. I didn't want that feeling ever again. And I remember he said to me, "If you never get high again, you'll never have to do this. You'll be donating clothing." And he's right, because by God's grace now I donate. But the point was, that set in, okay, I don't ever want to use again. Now what? Well, there was a lady in there named Miss Sue. And I remember, because I only had a certain amount of clothing, I would wash my clothes every couple. And that summer it was real hot. I wash my clothes every couple of days. Well, you're only allowed to wash your clothes twice, like once or twice a week. But I was doing it every other night. So she caught me and she sat me down. She said, "Young man, you're not allowed to do that. I'm sorry." And I just burst out crying. And I opened up to her and I said, "I want to get sober, but I feel like my life is so deep in the pits that it's impossible." And she rubbed my back and she said, "Oh no, you have a duty to be a son. You can do this." And I just started day by day. I woke up and I stopped counting my days. I started making my days count. I started a prayer group. And I started to realize, like, a lot of the people in there that worked in there were also in recovery. And I was like, there ain't no difference between me and them. Like, I started realizing, wait a minute, if I tried to die and I couldn't, maybe God had me here for a reason. And so when I left, found my wife, doing healthy things. Healthy people attract healthy people, doing healthy things. I found my wife, community, and I said, you know what, I'm going back to school. I just deep down believed that school was the answer. And I also believed that education would equalize and put me where I needed to be. I believed in education. And that's really due to my mom. Like, my mom always told me, going to college. So I just went back to what I knew, and that was college.
Wow. So it does it. I think it speaks a lot to how certain people will come into our lives during certain points, and you can't, it's almost like indescribable sometimes as to the timing of it and being able to be there at that right time to help you even have a more clear perspective as to what is possible out there. And when you speak about your mom, you speak with such, like, from her point of view, she provided so much support and encouragement. And as you would muster up, like I said, just that drive to then go into education, what was that journey like at the very beginning, say like your first day of class?
So I'll never forget it, right? I'll never forget this. I walk on to take my placement test, right?
Mhm.
So they send you up, and I go take it, and I'm looking at the placement test, and it's Chinese. I mean, I'm like, yo, but I'm so happy to be on campus. Like, I'm just walking around. Hey, my name's Freddie. I took meds. Blah blah blah. I'm at Ricky. Right. And it's deep because I remember people walked up to me and was like, "Hello, welcome." Then I remember ones was like, "Yeah, I'm cool." Right. Like, I remember all that. Right. But they don't get it. Like, I didn't come to this building, right, in search of good grades. I came in search of life, man. I'm trying to change my life. Like I was here to get the whole thing. All right. So never forget it. I go take my placement test. Lady comes over. She says, "Congratulations, sir. You scored in a remedial." I was like, yes. I thought remedial meant AP. Like, that's what I thought, because I didn't know nothing about college. Come to find out, remedial was the lowest classes. I almost quit. So I go back home, right? I tell my wife, I'm like, yo, I ain't going back. It's over. Like, I'm done. She's like, what? I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm not smart enough. I'll just work at Panera, because at the time I'm working at Panera. I was like, I'll just work at Panera, and that's what it is. She was like, no, you're going to go back to school. My point is, like, oh, and then let me say this.
Yeah.
So I joined PTK, Phi Theta Kappa National Honor Society. At the time, my mom was going to come be at the induction ceremony. She couldn't make it because her bipolar was acting wild and she was in a psych unit, right? So I was supposed to call her on the phone when I got inducted so she could hear it. Instead, the lady that I met at rehab, Sue, that uplifted me and told me that I had a duty to be a son, she came in place of my mother and was in the crowd. And when they yelled my name, she said, "Oh, Freddie." And she told my wife, "I love him like a son." Now, what's deep is she ended up relapsing and she passed away, right? Because she was in recovery. But what was deep was before she died, she gave me her 5-year sobriety course, right? So think about what I'm telling you, right? Like, I didn't enter the building as, all right, I got to get good grades. Okay, I got to do this. I got to go. No, school was actually secondary to what God was doing with me. See, my life was building and school was helping me do that. The grades were second. That's why I tell people when you go to college, man, listen, throw the books out. This building is supposed to be about changing you, about uplifting you, about teaching you. So that's what happened.
And it's, to me, that what you were saying just then, it's not, you're not just there within your specialization, but you're there to learn about life. I mean, I could remember when I first stepped foot on campus. It's your life now. You are responsible. And I'll never forget that. I always bring that up because my father, I remember right before we left, he said, "Listen," he goes, "I've raised you up to this point. You're obviously now an adult. You could choose between, you know the difference between good and bad. And this is your life. You make the decision. So yes, you could go out every night if you want to, but remember you have to live with certain, consequences, whatever that may be." And so my point in saying that is, you're right. Like, we learn so much about life, about responsibility, about even our social interactions. So you had touched upon it a little bit, but when you were on campus now, like into that first year, how was your social relationships alongside your academics? Because to me, that was certainly a challenge. So I'm always curious what that first year was really like.
Terrible. And here's what I mean. It was really unbalanced. I didn't have friends that were students because I'm older, I'm really mature, I'm there, I have mental health, psych, and all that. My friends became the people that worked in the building. So, like, for example, the reason I went to my first Green Bay game was because Stephanie, I call her Stephanie Green Bay Mom, she was a secretary at Campus Life. And I used to come down and I would talk to her all the time. Me and her got real tight. When I graduated college, she gave me my first tickets to a Green Bay game. She put me in the Hill, right? She's the reason I went to a Green Bay game, right? Brianne, she was the assistant director of Campus Life. She helped me write my first contract for my first speaking event. Me and her used to talk every week. I would walk in her office. Dr. Mickens, he's the one that gave me my first workshop. He helped get me my first workshop for the Pennsylvania Black Conference of Higher Education. Because of my age and what I was trying to build, I couldn't really deal with the students because they're younger than me just by default.
Sure.
But what I could do was the administrators and the faculty and the professors, they not only were teaching me, but they became my lifelong friends. To this day, I always say I left the community, but I left the college, but I never left the community. The people there are literally my friends. Like, I don't make a decision without talking to them. So it felt like, and I tell people this all the time, college to me felt like Thanksgiving dinner twice a week with home. Because when I would go early. So say class started 3, I would leave my house at 1:30 so I could check in with all the different people to let them know how I'm doing. And then I would go to class.
That is so smart, because I talk about this all the time, that if I could do it all over again, I would certainly speak to professors outside of the class, like literally just a 10-minute conversation, because I was so lost after I came out of my undergraduate degree when it came to career paths. Just even understanding what's even out there. Like, I wish I would have come early to speak to a professor. And I think that's so, so very smart as to what you did. And like you said, you now have professional relationships years later. Do you still stay in touch with them, like, pretty close?
Oh yeah, I don't make a decision in life without talking to them. Like, we talk about our families. Like, Brianne had a kid, her youngest, she'll be like, she wants to meet her Uncle Freddie. Like I was one of the first people she told that she was pregnant, right? Like, I mean, like there isn't Rose Kurtz. How am I forgetting Rose? Rose, my first advisor. She was the one that told me to get my house in order, and I trusted her. She helped my daughter find counseling, which eventually helped my daughter find rehab. Now my daughter got 4 years sober. We go over her house, just over her house like a month ago. We was eating lunch together. I talked to her about life. Like I love it. We tell each other we love each other on the phone. Like I call her auntie. When my mom died, all of them surrounded me. All of them. Like, I mean, they really they became family. Like I don't even. I mean, I can tell you this. Without them, I'm not where I'm at all. Yeah. So, and then the other thing to your point, let me get to something else you said.
Yeah.
You know, it pains me when I go to a college
Mm-hmm.
and a student about to graduate and they say, I don't know what I want to do. What do you mean you don't know what you want to do? That's what 4 years for. That's why I believe in teaching about mentorship and teaching about learning to college and teaching about reading the journals in your field and teaching about LinkedIn and teaching about do outside work. Like you should only be going to school to check off the grades as far as the college part of it. Other than else, whatever you're studying, you don't become a journalist when you graduate. You're a journalist the day you decide to go to school to be a journalist. So you should be reading and looking up journalists. You should be following your favorite journalists. You should be learning about it. You should be writing your own stuff. Like that is the key to me of people that don't waste the time and the money to go to college.
That's so true. And it's almost as if like not even just the academic side, but it's those life skills. I mean, the importance of networking, of having even that support system that should you leave 5 years down the road, you want to maybe switch career paths. You met a certain friend that's maybe in that area now where you could just pick up a phone and call them and ask them particularly about that area of study, if you will, or that industry. And that's what I think it had prompted me to do something later on in my life to actually start an organization. But it was that sense of community. And what was interesting is as I speak about community, you mentioned how those people actually became your family,
Yeah,
your support system.
absolutely.
That is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'll say this too. Like the way college is looked at is you come here, you know, I always say this, if you can take the tuition check, then you can care about the student, right? Like we marketed that come here, you grow, you become a good, strong man, you learn. But we all know when you go in there, that's very hard to do. There's a lot of gatekeeping. You know, there's a lot of things that go on. So it's important to learn your administrators, learn what they do for a living, learn how this building works, learn about the funding. So I agree.
That's such a good point,
Right.
and it's exactly right. I mean, go out there, go ask questions. But
Yeah.
yes,
So to your point, right? I had this argument with a professor one day, right, in class. And she was like, how are you doing all this keynote? I was like, well, you know, going to conferences. And she's like, how would you know about that? I was like, professors told us. I said, by the way, how come you haven't told us about conferences? She's like, because the students wouldn't care. Well, how do you know that? You got to ask. Listen, I learned when I go to conferences, when I walk in there, if I network, I give out my email. Let's say I meet 30 people. I email back. I'm going to hear back from at least 3. If I close a speaking gig on any one of them, this is before I'm at where I'm at. If I close a speaking gig on any one of them, that's a speaking gig I didn't have, and that's a new network that I can put on my thing right now, right? But they told me go to conferences and learn it. They threw me in the wood. They didn't. I hate when I hear this. Well, you got to get media training. You got to. No, you don't. No, we need to stop this. Listen, you know how I learned how to be on television? I went on television. You know how I learned how to write in newspapers? I worked with the editor. Like, because I think that stuff takes out the personality of it. I think it takes out who you are. My first time ever being on live set television was a couple months ago. I was up in Notre Dame, right? Blessed to be there. I shared the stage with the president of Notre Dame, Father Bob Dow. Shout out to him. I did, and I was on WNU TV, right? I was nervous out of my mind. I prayed. I took a deep breath. I talked to the reporter. I said, before we get on, I said, yo, what are we doing? What you know what I mean? Let me get in the right mind frame. I got on and I was just me. It was just me. I wasn't trying to like hit these talking about it. Just be yourself. Like, I think that's the problem with education. We're so worried about keeping it pristine. We're so worried about keeping it, well, you got to go through this step and you got to go through that. No, you don't. I didn't have to get my master's before I was a Keynote. Stop it. No, I didn't. All I had to do was be me. So,
And so you're right. Like sometimes I feel like even in life is you just have to take that first step no matter
yes,
what.
yes,
And knowing that you're not going to be, the best right when you start out,
not at
but
all.
you build on it and that personal growth. So you have to it's trial and error until you become better at it and more confident. I mean, being confident on camera. But Freddie, I want to speak so much about all the incredible accomplishments. So not only did you graduate, you graduated summa cum laude,
Mhm.
and you also spoke at a commencement.
Yeah, yeah.
So could you just discuss that journey that we spoke about the early beginnings in college, but the fact that you were standing up there now giving a keynote speech like at a commencement, share with us that journey.
All right. So a couple things. You got to understand from my background that I always believed I wasn't good enough. Always. And that's what bullying and trauma does, right? That's what growing up in a competitive environment when your mom's not very connected and she's not a board member of the PTA. She's not she's not on the school board, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'm not coming from connected wealth. You understand? So I always felt that I was here and everybody else was here. I always felt all these things were above me. Summa cum laude. You kidding me? I'm not that smart enough, right? Commencement speaking. You kidding me? None of that. What college did was it showed me that yes, you are. Yes, you are. It showed me that it's not how smart you are; it's how good you can learn the game and the networking at college. The reason I was able to be successful in college is because I managed my time and I got connected with the right people that showed me how to go through this system. I'll never forget, I had to practice my commencement, right? And I went up there with my film guy, and he said to me, he'd been with me from the beginning. And he said, when you get up there, I want you to take a deep breath. And I want you to look out and view. That's why in the beginning you say, take a deep breath to savor this moment. The reason I do that is I wanted to look out and remember and think about all the times and the days that I thought I wasn't good enough, the psych units, the shelters, all the institutions, everything I went through, the being laughed at, the being talked down about, like all that. I was looking at that crowd and they were looking to me, and these are graduates. Like I'm looking at my graduating class. And then I got that special human being sitting in that fourth row. I got my mom, I got my pastor, I got my everybody that's helped me, and I got my wife, and they all sitting there. Right. And like my wife blessed me. I pulled up in a limo that day. You know what I mean? Like it was just, like it was like it felt like I hit the lottery, man. Like it felt like a Super Bowl. Like here we are. Yet, they told me I was special education growing up. No, I wasn't. They told me that I had all these learning disabilities. No, I didn't. They told me I had ADHD. Yes, I do. They told me that, I needed psych meds. Yes, I do. They told me that, I wasn't smart enough and all this stuff. No, I wasn't. Y'all are not taking the factors of my outside out of this building, what's going on. Y'all don't know what's going on in my home. Y'all don't know what's happening. Y'all don't know the things that I'm dealing with before I even get here. Of course, I'm not getting great grades. Come stay in my home for a week and see the mess that's going on. But they're not taking that into consideration. You're just expected to be a rose out of concrete. You're just expected to achieve no matter what the circumstances are. That's insane. So what it meant to me was it was a moment in my mind that, Freddie, you was always good enough. You was never the problem for real. Genetic law don't matter.
Wow. So there you are at that commencement speech. And as you mentioned, that whole support system that you had, I believe you said in that fourth row,
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about, because you had mentioned it before, but your wife
Mm-hmm.
and the support that she has given, not only support, but encouragement
Mm-hmm.
to have you. Anytime somebody either puts you down, she was there to say, no, Freddie, you're going to get through this.
Mm-hmm.
So could you speak upon your wife and her role and just, like I said, the support and the encouragement to get you through?
Yes. So I always say Kim saves my life, and she said we saved each other. Let me be very clear. I cannot say my wife's age. I will get in trouble, and this is a podcast that everybody's going to see. And I like having a nice life at home, so I'm not allowed to say my wife's age. All I can tell you is she's older than me. There you go, Kim. I didn't mention age. Okay. So Kim was one of the best human beings I ever met on planet Earth. She literally is default con. She's an RN. We met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Kim just celebrated 10 years sober about like a month ago. She has 10 years sobriety clean. Her story is unbelievable. She got a DUI, stopped drinking. Her house was a mess, cleaned her life up. And now her daughter, they call her Gigi. Her daughter's sober 4 years. She's the matriarch of our family. She's unbelievable. She's one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life. Okay. I meet Kim. This is a true story how we met. So I'm in, where am I? Oh yeah, I'm in a halfway house. So after you go to rehab, you go to a place, a halfway house. You stay there, you get a job, build your life up, all that. That's a whole nother issue. Okay. So she walks up to me after one of the meetings. I heard her share, and I was like, man, sharing is where you share your story in the meetings. I was like, man, she real. I'm a fan. So she walked up, she said, hey, can I make you food at the halfway house? I was like, yeah, of course. So I'll never forget, right? I'm a picky eater. I just did the ancestry thing. I'm a genetically, by DNA, a picky eater. My dad did that. Parent one, that's my dad. I'm a genetically picky eater. Okay. So she made me chili, right? And so I'm looking through the chili, and I'm like, man, she put beans in there. Now, mind you, I'm homeless. I should be grateful, right? Like, I should be grateful. So she put beans in there. I'm like, man, but I'm hungry. I'm like, whatever. So I heat it up. So it comes out. And the dude's sitting across the thing from me. And I start eating it. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. She was the first chili I ever had that had sausage in it. I never had that. I was like, oh my God. So I called back. Yo, what up? My name Freddie. What's good with you? So that started us hanging out. So we hang out for a while. I fall in love with her. And I'll never forget, I said, Kim, I love you, but this ain't never going to work. Now, mind you, we're feeding the homeless. We're going to church. She had rededicated her life to God. I mean, things are moving. Mm-hmm. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, you have more than me. You're a homeowner. You know, you graduated college. You know, you have a career. I'm in a shelter and I'm working at Panera. This ain't going to work. You're more developed in life. She said, Freddie, it is not about what you have. It's about who you are. Now, I had never in my life met a woman that loved me for me and not the requirement of W-2, CV, what are you driving, what are you doing? I have always been taught you don't go for a woman or a relationship until you're in a certain place to provide. She taught me what provide meant. And it was not just that financial piece. It meant, how do you provide spiritually? How do you provide as a dad? How do you provide emotionally? Like, you can make money, but that don't mean you're making no impact. It ain't, see, to be with Kim, it wasn't, could I pay the light bill? It was, how good of a human being was I? And that was the lesson. That taught me a lot. So, all right, fast forward. When I wanted to go back to school, I wanted to quit. She said, nope, you're going. I ain't arguing. Happy wife, happy life. Then to start my company, I'll never forget this. It's 2018. Every Sunday, I'm a diehard football fan. I'm a diehard Green Bay fan. So every Sunday, right, my wife makes me pancakes, right? Every Sunday. I watch Red Zone. So she's making me pancakes. I'm very blessed. And I got the LLC paperwork up. All I got to do is hit the enter button, and it's real. And I said, Kim, I can't do this. And she said, why? I said, I can't go around the country telling my story. She said, why? I said, because I just can't, man. Like, I'm too scared. She said, what? She said, Freddie, you have been given a gift. It would be selfish for you not to share it. Other people need to hear it. Hit enter, fear nothing. Let's go. Well, 6 months ago, I just had my first speaking event in Africa. So what my wife taught me is that, oh, and one other story. I'll never forget this, right? I did the press conference with Tom Wolfe, right? Yeah. With the Free Hunger Campus stuff. We'll get into that in a minute. Yep. And so the next day, I got to go work at Panera and washing dishes. And I got this 21-year-old telling me what to do, right? And I'm like 40, right? And I don't care about the age. I care about the behavior. Like she telling me what to do, go clean the toilet and all this stuff. And I'm like, I got in a parking lot, I'm crying. I said to my wife, I said, well, I must do wash the dishes and clean the toilets. And I just passed legislation with the governor. This just ain't right. What's that? She said, Freddie, because your faith isn't right. Until you trust God in your company that guides you where you need to be, you're going to wash dishes. So when you get your faith together, then you'll stop washing dishes. Bye. She was right. A couple months later, I left. Now, by God's grace and mercy, I've been living off this for the past 2 years.
Unbelievable
Yeah, you can't
story
make it
there.
up.
One thing I wanted to go back to was this idea of stemming from what your wife was talking about, but this idea that we should never judge a book by its cover, but
Never.
more so what is in one's heart.
Yes.
I wholeheartedly believe in that. And getting to know somebody, that is something I'm so passionate about. I talk about it all the time because you take the effort. Everybody today is in a rush, either busy, that's understood. But I love to take time to get to know somebody first, regardless if somebody else tells me about a certain person. Until you have that your own conversation with that person, you do not know who that person is.
At all.
And exactly. And
And,
their story. Please.
and to your point, right? This is when I found out. So the smartest people I ever met were in homeless shelters and psych units. And the reason is because they fight life and they spend most of their days at libraries reading because libraries are always open. I'll never forget this. So this one time, right? I'm like 24 or something. I'm in the shelter or something like that, right? I'm like 24. And this guy was an older guy, it wasn't very hygienic, just bad attitude. I'm looking down on him like, what are you doing here? Even though I'm in here with you, right? All the stuff.
Yeah.
We got to talking, and my ego was suffocating, right? And we started talking about power and American dynamics, and somehow we got into talking about the Queen Elizabeth. And I made the statement. I said something like, well, it's like this or that, like trying to explain it. He, for an hour, I don't even know if he took a breath. For an hour straight, he gave me an absolute historical education on the British system of money, on a government. And he educationally absolutely cussed me out and put me in my place. It was the nicest, kindest. And I remember at the end, he said, young man, do better, read more. And it was a lesson. It was a lesson like, wow. Here this man is. And I'll never forget, he told me, he said, I used to be a lawyer for years. The economy went tank, our business went up, and I ended up homeless. Don't confuse where I'm at with what I know. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. That's why I tell everybody, don't think when you're walking past a homeless person that they're there. I say this all the time. Poverty is seen as a moral failure instead of a policy issue. Don't ever confuse when you walk past a homeless person that they're dumb and lazy. Don't do that. You'll be very surprised when you start talking to them. The intelligence, the vernacular, what they know. Don't confuse that.
Well, and I think also too is understanding that human element of you could fall on bad times very quickly in your life. And to be grateful for what you have every single day, because I saw it back in 2011 when the recession had already obviously hit, but the aftermath, like losing our house. But it's the point that you could see one's family, you're traveling with gymnastics, you're doing this, you're doing that, and you could easily fall on such a hard time. It could turn your life around. And what people think that you have, you actually do not. But I think that's why I'm so passionate about communication, because more so than ever today, I could even speak for myself, is that I am very cognizant. If somebody tells me about somebody else, I do my own due diligence, because you do not know their story. Everybody has a story. And when you get to know where they came from, what has influenced them, just like we're talking today, your story is profound and has so much power to inspire. And before I keep going on, I want to get to, you have so many accolades and so many accomplishments after you had graduated, Freddie.
Yeah.
You had spoke about it briefly, but you had reached legislative corridors
Yeah.
with former Governor
Yep.
Tim Wolf. So Pennsylvania Hunger-Free Campus Bill. Could you speak more upon
Yeah.
your involvement with that?
So yeah, what an honor. That was due to Dr. Sarah Goldridge Robb. That's my mentor. I mean, she done done so much.
Oh.
I mean, she done done so much. Yeah. I mean, I definitely. I mean, she just. I mean, she just. I got blessed to know her. So I had done some work with her that put me on a map with somebody that was working with them, and I was at Westchester, and they office called me and was like, "We'd love for you to be a part of this." And so what happened was the federal government had got a surplus to Pennsylvania. Federal government gave Pennsylvania a surplus. Okay. When they did that, the Republicans and Democrats were arguing about what that money should go to. The Republicans wanted to go to infrastructure, but the Democrats wanted it to go to people. And I couldn't understand, if you want us to go to work, the roads got to be right, right? But in order for us to get to work, we got to have a car to do it. So, right? Okay. My thinking is this. As a person that I know, my mother told me half of her check went to daycare. That is absolutely insane. Think about that. Half her check goes to daycare. So the money for us to go to museums, us to visit stuff, us to travel, us to do stuff, that's out, because she has to pay for childcare in order to have a job. If she doesn't work, then the government says she's lazy. You can't lose to win, can't win to lose. Okay. So what Governor told me, he said, why don't you talk about how the government helped you be where you're at? Because it did. Medicaid is the reason I went to rehab. It paid for it. It paid for my halfway house. It paid for my therapy. I used to go weekly, sometimes twice a week. It paid for my psych meds. If I don't have them things, Freddie is dead, high, or in jail. End of story. Okay. Food stamps. Do you know how critical that was the first 2 years when I couldn't afford food? Critical. My wife said the other day, man, I miss food stamps. Yeah, eggs are kind of high, right? Okay. Like my health care. Listen, my psychiatry is a specialization. They don't consider psychiatry normal. You ask somebody if they got, you want to see how much money you got? Get a psychiatrist out of network. Get a therapist out of network and deal with that. I didn't have to do childcare. I mean, just all these different things. So my thing was, y'all see me up here and y'all see these accolades. Y'all see how blessed I've been. And yes, I worked hard, but what about the help? What about the fact that this program, the Keys program, paid for all my books? Do you know how expensive college books are? We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Okay. A book bag. They gave my bus pass transportation, right? College isn't IQ. It's who can get through the support of it. Listen, when I spoke, I was blessed. I spoke at Notre Dame. I did some work with Stanford. My mentor actually is a Yale psychiatrist doctor, right? Did some work with them. There's no difference between those students there in a community college. The difference is they were born into genetic lotto where their moms and dads, their dad might be a hedge fund manager. The mom's a stay-at-home mom. They don't even work going to school. All they do is go to school. So they're reading stock market books in third grade. They're playing the game different. So whereas where I'm growing up, I'm worried about food, water, shelter. They're growing up learning how to have a business, learning how to have an LLC. They're not smarter, they're just learning different. So my whole thing was, when we get this money in, you got to give it to people that don't have. Because if you don't, you're going to pay for it in jail. You're going to pay for it in psychiatry. You're going to pay for it in food stamps. Like either way, you're going to pay. So that's been my whole thing, that we got to stop with this work hard. And we got to start putting more emphasis on the help that you get, which is allows you to work hard. That's what I've said.
That's such a good point. And, I feel like we keep almost like circling back around, kind of skirting on it, but you mentioned like support system so much. You're right. You could work hard, but I think back to my childhood, early adulthood, and my father, as a single parent, if it was not for him and instilling confidence, self-esteem, there is something to be said about a support system. And like I said, I understand people may not have parents, but even if it's grandparents, even if it's extended family, everybody needs that support system, because I truthfully believe from that point of my life to where I'm at today, I would not be the person, as far as even having confidence to try new things, to have that no fear of just go for it. You're going to make mistakes, but in order to get to that point, I contribute it all to that support system. And, in that situation, my father growing up.
Yeah.
So please, yeah.
Let me say this, right? My daughter had a methamphetamine addiction. She went to 2 rehabs. By God, grace, and mercy, she just celebrated 4 years sober last week. I met her at 18. Last month. I met her at 18. She's now 27. I didn't biologically have her. She calls me dad, though. Okay. Check this out. I watched her walk to rehab. I watched her walk her journey in rehab and out. And it's so funny that her wisdom to see it. She absolutely knows that no matter how hard she would have worked, without the help, she wouldn't be where she's at. Her grandma takes care of her schooling. We took care of her car insurance. She pays a lot of her bills, but she was able to get healthy and not have to work. She was able to work on herself and not have to work because she had parents and she had a grandparent that was looking out for her. Do you know how many people come home from treatment and they got to go right back to work, or they don't have the time to do it? And people wonder why don't they get healthy? Because my brain didn't heal. I need time. And in order to have time, you got to have money. And so what I'm saying is, it hurts me, right? When, like, you look at the social determinants of health and stuff, and because I don't want to get into the weeds with this stuff.
Sure.
But it's statistically proven, when you are born, what you come into has a lot to say about where you're going to end up. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule. Okay, if you take a kid in Compton, right, and his mom is a sex worker and his dad is doing 15 years for murder, right? More than likely, he's probably not going to Rutgers Law. But if you take the kid whose mom went to Rutgers Law or dad went to Notre Dame Law, more than likely they're going to end up being a lawyer. Now, what is the difference between them two kids? It's not IQ. It's where you're born at. It's your environment. All that stuff matters. And when I went to Africa, I really realized that. Like, seeing a different vibe. As I traveled, I've spoken in 25, 50 states. I realized a lot of this is genetic, Lotto. A lot of it is who pours into you. A lot of it is what you see. A lot of it is how you see it. So, I don't know. I just think that stuff's important.
No, 100%. And it brings me to that idea of when I constantly talk about the importance of even community, not even, just the family, like the nuclear family, but also just community. Because even when I think about growing up, like I said, my father was a single parent, but as you would move forward, you realized that, yes, even though I didn't have the full nuclear family, so to speak, I was so incredibly blessed by his presence, as simplistic as presence.
Right.
That's why I always pay tribute, because it's incredible. Like when you were speaking about all those people throughout your time in college, just other areas of life too, but how as a community we do need to come together, because more so than ever, I feel like today, because if people fall on hard times, because it's not hard to do today. If you fall on hard times, that there's people to support you. That's why I'm such a big advocate about pulling people together and understanding their story, because that's what's critical. You could have it all, but you could also lose it all. So.
Well, he giveth, he taketh.
Yes.
And I think a lot of this comes down to where's your spiritual nature, right? Yeah. So I tell everybody this, the best thing ever happened to me in my life is I got spit on, ate out of a dumpster, right? Because now I pray before every meal. I always did, but let me put it this way. It changed me. I understand up today don't mean up tomorrow. When I land in the city when I'm speaking, I find somebody homeless, I take them out to eat no matter what. My granddaughter, as soon as she gets of age, she'll be feeding the homeless. You know, my daughter, she understands that. Like, we feed the homeless. We pray. Like, we don't see, I understand where you're at today has nothing to do with tomorrow. Like, I understand that. So I'm trying to make sure I always keep center and be grateful to understand that if you take away the keynotes, if you take away school, you take away the accolades, and you just have me, then what?
That's so true. And you know what it reminds me of? But it was that idea, it was that perspective of we are all going to get knocked down in some form, shape, or way in life. And it is in those times that I felt like now, as I look back, no matter what it was, I mean, I could give you so many times I've been knocked down and had to like rise again, but you become more compassionate, I feel, with understanding others and
Yes,
understanding that the world we live in, it's like I said, it's not so hard for something to get taken away and your whole life could completely change. So to be more kind to people, to be grateful in these moments that you have in present day, not looking too far into the future, but understanding that it could all be taken away tomorrow.
absolutely. That's why who you are as a person, I tell everybody, when I go speak at schools, I say, do you want a CV of life, or do you want a CV on paper, or do you want a CV in soul? You know, you got a choice to make. Um,
That's
because I know a lot of people that got CV long as the day's long, but ask them what type of person they are, right? So, because the CV is soul is going to be last way longer. And I tell my daughter all the time, like when we talk, you know, if she gets a new car or something new or do something, I'm like, all right, Megan, but here's the deal. I don't care about that. What I care about is how are you? Our Sunday dinners are what are you doing? So
yes. And I think that's so true. It reminded me, as you were speaking, but when it's really about what's inside of the person, it's not the titles you have. That's something that's so interesting to me is that even like throughout the years, I remember when I was in college, Freddie, I thought a professor was so far above me. I couldn't even talk to
me
them.
too. Me too. It's the hierarchical nature on how it's built, right? So
Yeah.
that's a system. I've been. So let me tell you a story. So I'm at my first national conference, right? I'll never forget this as long as I live. I'm at my first national conference, right? And I ain't gonna say the national conference because I don't want to scream on them because it ain't their fault. But this is what happened. So I'm at my first national conference, whatever, and I'm networking. I'm at this networking event, and it's all these like higher ed people, like high up. And I walk up to the lady, and I got my elevator pitch. I'm like, oh, my name's Freddie. I work two hats. And she was like, young man, what are you doing keynote and you don't have your doctorate yet? Right? Like, that's what she told me. And I would run into that. And I said to her, I said, well, it wasn't my finest Christianly moment, but I said, have you ever eaten out of a dumpster? She said, no. I said, well, I guess we both ain't pay our dues. Like, my point is, I've had professors say, you call me doctor, right? Like, here's my thing. When I die and I go meet Jesus in my belief system, he's not going to say to me, well, you have a doctorate. Well, you were on CNN. Well, you got published in the New York Times. Well, you have passed legislation. Well, you're da da da. He's not going to say to me, Dr. Shegog. He's not going to call me that. You know, he's going to want to know. It's either going to be two words: job well done, my good and faithful. Welcome, or I never knew you. That's it. He's not going to be impressed that I got a doctorate. He's going to want to know that doctorate that you have. Did you make it better for the people coming behind you? If you didn't do that, bye. The whole point of getting these degrees is not for us. It's for us to make it better for the people behind us. That's what a doctorate is. You're a doctorate of humanity of a certain field. So you're supposed to make it better for other people. We take these titles way too far. And really all it means is that you could get through a system. You had the support, you had the finances, and you had the love to be able to walk through a system. And you worked hard, but you had the support, love, and all that to walk through a system. That don't mean you're better than somebody. My MPA does not listen. My daughter don't listen to me better because I got my MPA. Trust me. I tell her to do something she doesn't. She doesn't want to. My wife don't. I still don't like her meatloaf. It didn't change after I got my MPA. All right. Like my cousins and people I love to death, they still get on my nerves. They didn't change after I got my doctorate. It don't. Like stop it, people. Like
You know, Oh man. A couple of things. I literally, as you're speaking, I spoke about this yesterday. It was like on a live stream, but my father taught me one of the most valuable lessons before I stepped foot into my first professional, if you will, like
Mhm.
job, so to speak. And it was in sales. But it was this idea that being in pharmaceutical sales, you obviously have to go speak with the physician as
Right.
far as even just signatures and everything else that is required. But he told me, he goes, Courtney, I want you to always remember it is about building relationships. And not only that, you treat everybody equally. So that's the way that I think about life is like, Courtney, you always treat people equally because you never know, they may start somewhere and you may see them, but where they end could be a completely different story. So do like treat everybody equally and with respect. And
Absolutely.
that was literally, that was one of, he taught me many lessons for that matter in sales, but that one just stands out. And I saw more than a job, if you will. I saw that I was building relationships that made me actually more fulfilled on the job, if that makes any
That makes a
sense.
lot of sense. That's a very good point. I
Yeah.
remember somebody told me one time, that's a very good point. I remember somebody told me one time, Freddie, in the building, they might be higher than you, but in the parking lot, you're the same.
Ooh.
So in the building, they might be manager, you're senior, but in the parking lot, you're the same. I'll never forget that.
That's so true. And I think, I mean, even now, unless it's some formal title that I need, I never really used my titles, as you
I
can
don't
see
either.
on LinkedIn.
I don't like. Only time I use it is when I speak, and sometimes I don't even use it then, depending on the audience I'm at, because the kids don't care. But they don't like. How's your MPA going to help me feed my family?
See, and I think it's stripping away and understanding who we are as human beings, like
Right,
what's inside.
right.
I felt like, it certainly took maturity throughout the years to get to this point, but it really is. It's like when you look at life, when it's all like said and done, the level of fulfillment that I've had, like the greatest fulfillment is truthfully getting to know people. It wasn't even like, I mean, what I'm doing now, people will always ask me, like, okay, well, like, what exactly are you doing and how much are you going to get paid doing that? But what type of impact? That is what I'm going for, is the impact and the message.
That is the wealth gap, right? So part of that is the wealth gap, and part of that is just a form of capital, a symptom of capitalism, and part of that is we think being professional isn't. We confuse. We always say stay professional. Well, to me, being yourself is professional. I never understood that. Be professional. Being myself is professional. This is who I am. Like I understand where I'm at. I know this ain't Sunday football. I know to be myself. Being myself is professional. So yeah, you make a really good point about and I'll say that too about just this whole thing with money, right? So like with my job, right? I speak at schools for a living. Okay, I have a fee that God has blessed me with,
Sure.
but I promise you, I don't always get that. I promise you that schools call me and say, we don't have no money. Depending on how it's delivered,
Mhm.
depending on what they're doing, depending on the energy spirit of it,
Yeah.
I do it. Because when I get done, a kid walks up and says, thank you for helping giving me hope because I have your situation and I don't want to live anymore. Thank you for helping me realize that my mom's not a bad person. She has a chemical imbalance called mental illness. Thank you for
Mhm.
helping me today feel better about myself because I've been getting bullied in this school and you're the first person I've seen overcome and talk about it. Now, if I don't take that gig because I need money, then that kid don't hear that. And what if that kid isn't inspired to do what he need to do? So my whole point is, what is the value? I don't care if what is the value of I got paid nothing to do this, but a kid told me I helped save his life.
To your very point, it's almost this idea of redefining what success is,
Absolutely.
and that narrative that's constantly fed that you're like only a success if you have XYZ as your income. And that's why literally when I took this next step into this like next chapter, I saw other problems, other issues, other challenges that were more important for me. Like people are like, well, you got your, your majors in sport. Like, are you doing anything in sport? Yes, of course it's part of it. I won't get into all of that, but it's the point that I did go more of an unconventional route because I saw a gap and a need to just simplistically help society, help young adults come up, help us start forming community. At least, at the very, very least, my hope is that the message gets across to just simply to build community, to become more connected with one another, and to focus ultimately on our communication. If you have a chance to be in person with that person, do it.
Yes.
And that to me is more than any dollar amount that could provide that sense of happiness, because you would be amazed how many people have actually asked me directly
Yeah.
about, well, how much are you making? And I'm like, that, but you know what? Freddie, it brought up a point. See, I always like to look at things deeper. Like,
Right.
why is somebody asking that? It's almost as if what society is like pushing on us that no, Courtney, you have to think that financial success is success. Like,
Yeah.
you know what
Which
I mean?
and it's deep. Right. I'll tell you this quick story. So I I spoke at one of the richest places on earth, like to live in. Right. It's one of the richest places. I'll never get this long as I live. And so you can only get there by plane or boat. Okay. So I'm up there, and this kid, I love ice cream. Like I'm a real ice cream person,
Me
right?
too.
Yeah. I love vanilla malts.
What's your favorite?
Vanilla malts. That's what I'm into. So this kid, right? He give me the ice cream, and I say, "Yo, dog, like, why y'all up here getting in trouble? Y'all rich? Like, why am I here talking to y'all about drugs and alcohol? Y'all rich? Like, what is wrong with you?" And he laughed. He said, "You outsiders." I said, "What you mean?" He said, "Being rich is a trap." I said, "I don't understand." Now, this kid was 16 at the time. He said he started shooting heroin in his neck at 13. I said to him, "Now listen, I've been in a plethora of rehabs. I've heard it all. There ain't too much I ain't heard. I mean, my family's Jerry Springer in real life. Like, you got to really say some stuff for me to be like, oh, I never heard that. I mean, I've heard stuff that make sense." And I said, now, mind you, at this time, my straw done fell on my ice cream fell. I'm like, what? I'm crying. He said, yeah. He said, when I ran out of dope, because I used to snort dope at 13, he said, when I ran out of dope, I called my mother because I knew she would know what to do because my mom's a drug addict. He said, my mom said, come here. And his mom was the one that showed him how to shoot heroin in his neck. In my mind, I said, why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you tell somebody? He said, you want me to tell CYS? I said, yeah. He said, my dad sits on the board of CYS. He said, what you don't understand is that when you're this rich, first of all, our nannies raise us, not our parents. Second of all, the men are trying to keep the generational wealth going. And so they're stressed out and the wives are never taken care of and they're drunk and they're alcoholics. He said, being in this is being trapped. He said, I hate it up here. He said, I feel like I'm in a jail cell. And he told me, he said, don't ever think money gives you freedom. I'll never get as long as I live.
Wow. And I think it goes back to this main message of when you look at the big picture, it's about getting to know people and their story, because what you perceive sometimes from the outside in, and you think you know how they live and what happens, like you said, until you actually have a conversation. And that's like a message I feel like just today in general. I mean, I think about it a lot. I literally tell myself, I'm like, okay, Courtney, if you're going to, interview this person, like get to know them. You
You
know
do
what I
that.
mean?
You do that. I've been blessed to be on a lot of podcasts, and they've all done great research. You've probably done the most of anybody I've known.
Thank you so much. But
Yeah, I
it's
really
not
respect your professionalism and your due diligence and your dogmatic approach to this. Salute to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But you know what? It's not even about the podcast. It's about
Right.
why we're here, literally here
Right.
on earth. It's
Right.
to
Right.
build these relationships and to help people along the way.
Right.
And so I think everything that you're saying, like when we look at that positive side of it, we've spoken about support systems,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of it, the
Mm-hmm.
idea of getting to know somebody, not what somebody tells you about somebody,
Right. But
but
actually getting to know them.
getting to know them and their story and understanding why they view things through a certain lens and a certain perspective. Because, like I said, everybody has different experiences. And so, Freddie, your story is so profound when you speak about where you have been to where you are at today. You speak nationally. You speak at colleges, universities, institutions. That is such a large accomplishment. And that is the positivity that that we look at this story with. And I would love for you to speak about maybe a positive phrase or a positive quote to leave our
Yes.
community with.
So I'm gonna leave you with this story, right? So I'll never forget this. My mom had got diagnosed with leukemia, right? And so they told her she had 2 years to live. And so I'm like paying attention, but not paying attention. So I'll never forget this. I had landed, I was in Dallas, and her health was getting bad, right? She about to hit hospice. It's getting real. I said, bet. I said, I'm about to be on the next flight coming home. She said, no, you're not. I said, what are you talking about? She said, Freddie, what have I been telling you since you were a kid? I said, what? To much is given, much is required. Luke 12:48. You're not coming home to take care of me because you have a job to do. We are in transition. I'm going to go meet Jesus, and I can die because of the man that you have become. I'm going to sleep very well because I'm leaving the earth, and my son is a national speaker that's helped other kids. You're going to go to that school, and you're going to help the kid that's struggling today, like me and you were struggling, and you're going to tell him it's going to be all right. And then you're going to help the teachers help that kid. Your job is not to come home and save me. Your job is to go save them kids. You don't have to come home to prove you're a good son. You prove you're a good son by doing what you're doing. This is transition. I just have been blessed that I had a different type of parent. I was very blessed.
I got a little emotional on that one. I do want to say, like I said, your story, you have now especially a gift for helping people through your speaking. And I want our listeners, I'm certainly going to put your website on all the advertisements, but to actually see how many places, prestigious places that you have spoken at and how you have changed for the positive so many people's lives to be able to look at life differently if they are going through struggles, that you are living proof that you could move forward, you
Yes.
could turn things around. And that is the positive message that I want our listeners to leave with today. Freddie, it has been an absolute honor to have you on the Plenty of
Bless you.
Positivity.
I got to say this. You're a Florida State alum and Florida State, and I'm a diehard Gator. This is, look, you want to talk about being positive, right? This would not happen in no other universe. Like, legit. Like, y'all didn't break my heart. I didn't cry over Florida State football. So I really got to love you because I'm a diehard Gator fan. So bless you.
Freddie, I actually have some pretty good news before we close this.
Right.
My undergraduate degree is from the University of
Really?
Florida. Go Gators. Yes.
You're the first person I met. So you went to Florida State and Florida. What?
I am a unique creature, if you will. It's funny. I have my pictures here, like as far as gymnastics and everything.
Right.
I was a gymnast there,
Right.
but ironically, I don't know how it would have it, but throughout the years, I went to started at UF, UCF, and then here Florida State University, and I'm odd. There's no doubt about it.
You were a gymnast at Florida.
I was.
Oh, yeah, you're real deal. You're real deal. You're serious. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. Gosh, I was so honored to be on that team. It literally like transformed my life.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, so grateful. But
Well, bless you and thank you. I want to get this on record. I
no.
thank you for taking the time, the heart, the spirit, and the energy to do this. And to do this about positivity and sharing people's stories, being so delicate with it. Bless you for the work you're doing. This is what the youth needs. Humanity is better because of you.